All right, so we've got a ton of stuff to unpack about this Man U game. The loss to Crystal Palace at Old Trafford.
2-0.
2-0, right?
At Old Trafford.
It's we've got match reports, expert analysis, even some pretty opinionated commentary.
Yeah, some strong opinions in there.
It's really like we're piecing together a puzzle here, trying to figure out what went wrong.
And the puzzle gets even more complex when you consider, like, the different approaches of these two teams.
Yeah.
Almost like comparing, a really finely tuned watch to a kaleidoscope that's constantly changing its shape.
Ooh, I like that. A watch and a kaleidoscope. So for those of you listening, this wasn't just any loss for Man U. This was their 7th home defeat this season and their 11th overall.
So, it's not just that they're losing, it's that they're struggling on their own turf.
Yes.
And to add insult to injury, they also lost defender Lisandro Martinez, who had to be carried off with a potentially serious knee injury.
Oh, man. That's adding injury to insult, literally. So let's shift gears and talk about the manager, Ruben Amorim. This loss extends his winless streak, and it puts him in some pretty historically significant territory.
Yeah, it does. No United manager since the 72-73 season has had to wait this long for back-to-back league wins.
Woof, that's a serious drought. And here's what I don't get. Amorim hasn't fielded the same starting lineup twice this entire season. I mean, is he just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, or is there a method to this madness?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It could be tactical experimentation for sure, especially since he's talked about, the players being on trial, almost like he's still assessing who truly fits his vision for the team.
So maybe he's not just looking for the best 11 players, but the best 11 personalities, the right mix of grit and talent and who knows what else.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like he's trying to build a high-performance engine, but he's still figuring out, which parts go where. And sometimes that means swapping things out, even if it causes some sputtering in the short term.
But is there a risk that he's tinkering too much? Creating instability instead of finding solutions?
There's always that risk.
Yeah.
And some of what we're seeing in these sources hints at a possible clash between his long-term vision and the immediate pressure to get results.
Right.
But he's also been very clear that he prioritizes commitment and effort above all else. Like, he even brought an extra coach to the game instead of a player because he felt the bench players weren't working hard enough in training.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It definitely sends a message.
Okay, let's circle back to the match itself. One thing that really stood out to me was the decision to play Kobbie Mainoo as a false nine.
Yeah, that was an unconventional choice for sure.
Yeah.
But you know what? It actually did create some early chances for them.
It did.
It's like Amorim found this hidden keyhole for a moment, but then Crystal Palace quickly slammed the door shut.
And that's when the experts really started weighing in. A lot of them are saying that United is desperately lacking a clinical striker, someone who can consistently put the ball in the back of the net.
Because right now, they're relying on those flashes of brilliance from players like Diogo Dalot and Bruno Fernandes.
Right.
And those guys can be spectacular, but it's not a reliable strategy if you want to win consistently.
It's like trying to win a marathon by sprinting the whole way. You might have those bursts of speed, but eventually you're going to hit a wall.
Exactly. And that's where the contrast with Crystal Palace becomes so interesting. They weren't flashy, but their efficiency was impressive, especially Jean-Philippe Mateta with his 2 goals.
And here's the kicker. Mateta has scored 10 goals this season, which is exactly the kind of production that Man U is missing.
Right. It really exposes their biggest weakness. Palace knew what they were good at, they stuck to their game plan, and it paid off.
They were like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. Not flaky, but ruthlessly effective.
And that brings up a really important question for Man U. Can they adapt and evolve in a similar way, or will they continue to get outplayed by teams that on paper shouldn't be such a threat? And for you listening, keep in mind this wasn't just a fluke. This is Crystal Palace's 3rd victory over Man U in their last 4 meetings.
Wow.
Clearly, they've found a way to exploit United's weaknesses. But the question is, has Amorim figured out how to plug those holes? That's what we'll be digging into next.
It's like Crystal Palace has Man U's number or something. They just can't seem to crack the code.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
And one of the experts pointed out something really interesting. They were talking about the body language of the two teams, how different it was.
Oh, yeah, I totally noticed that too. Palace were like buzzing with this, confident energy, like a pack of wolves that had just cornered their prey.
Right.
But Man U, some of those guys looked defeated before the second goal even went in.
Yeah, one expert even used the word ambling to describe Xerxes and Hochland when they came off the bench.
Oof, not exactly what you want to see from guys who are supposed to be game changers.
Right.
It's like they already knew they were going to lose. And you know what? I think that lack of energy it speaks to a bigger issue, this over-reliance on individual brilliance that we were talking about earlier. It's like they're so focused on trying to create these highlight reel moments that they forget about the fundamentals. Hard work, determination, that hunger to win every single ball.
And that's exactly the kind of thing that a team like Palace can exploit with their, disciplined and pragmatic approach. They don't get caught up in the hype. They just execute their game plan. And next thing you know, you're down 2 goals, scratching your head. Like, how did that happen?
It's like they're playing chess while Man U's stuck playing checkers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you got to give credit to Patrick Vieira, their manager. He's done a phenomenal job of instilling that mentality in his players.
Yeah, he's got them playing like a team that's greater than the sum of its parts, They're not star-studded by any means, but they're incredibly well coordinated and they know exactly how to take advantage of their opponent's weaknesses.
Which brings us back to Amorim and the immense challenge he's facing.
Right.
He's inherited this squad that's been built over several seasons, with different managers, different philosophies. And it's pretty clear that some of those pieces just don't fit the puzzle he's trying to put together.
Like trying to build a house with mismatched bricks and warped beams.
Exactly. And that's where the decision to give Erik ten Hag a new contract last season becomes really interesting.
Yeah.
Remember, that decision was based largely on winning the FA Cup, a short-term success that maybe masked some of the deeper structural problems within the squad.
So now Amorim's not only trying to find the right players, he's also trying to undo some of the choices made by the previous regime.
Yeah, and it creates this tension between short-term expectations and his long-term vision.
Right.
The fans are understandably impatient. They want results now. But Amorim seems to be playing the long game, which, requires a certain level of trust and patience from the club's hierarchy.
It's like he's trying to turn this massive ship around. But the currents are strong, and there are a lot of people on board who are used to sailing in a completely different direction.
And it's not just about personnel. It's about mentality. He needs to instill a new culture, a new way of thinking about the game. And that takes time.
It's a process.
Right. Absolutely.
Speaking of the big picture, let's talk about what this loss means for Man U's ambitions this season. I mean, obviously the Champions League dream is fading, but they're still in the Europa League, right?
They are. And some of the experts are suggesting that this might actually be their most realistic path back into the Champions League.
So instead of trying to climb Mount Everest, maybe they should focus on conquering a smaller peak first.
Exactly. The Europa League may not have the same prestige, but it's still a major European competition, and winning it would guarantee them a spot in next year's Champions League.
So maybe this loss to Crystal Palace could be a blessing in disguise. It forces them to reassess their priorities and focus their energy on a competition they can actually win.
It's possible. And, a deep run in the Europa League could even give them the boost they need to turn their league form around. Momentum is a powerful thing in football. Success in one competition can often spill over into another.
But in order to build that momentum, they need consistency, which is something they've been sorely lacking this season. And that brings us back to the core issue. Is Amorim believe that he has the players he needs to achieve that consistency within the current squad?
Or will he be forced to dip into the transfer market and find those missing pieces that can unlock the potential of his system?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that leads us to another layer of this puzzle. The January transfer window is right around the corner, and the rumor mill is already churning.
Oh, yeah.
The sources we have don't give us any definitive answers, but they do offer some intriguing hints.
Okay.
There's talk of Amorim being interested in a very specific type of striker, someone who can not only score goals, but also link up the play and create chances for his teammates.
So not just a target man, but like a complete forward.
Right. Someone who can be the focal point of the attack without sacrificing the fluidity of the team as a whole.
Exactly. And that's a rare breed.
Which means he's going to have to be incredibly shrewd if he wants to find that missing piece. But there's another wrinkle to this whole transfer puzzle. Financial fair play regulations.
Ah, yes, the ever-present shadow of FFP. It's like a financial straitjacket that limits their ability to spend freely.
So even if they find the perfect player, they might not be able to afford him.
Right, which just adds another layer of complexity to Amorim's task.
He needs to find solutions that are not only tactically sound, but also financially viable. It's like playing chess, but your opponent can change the rules at any moment.
That's a good analogy.
And then there's the added pressure of Man U's history. This is a club that's used to success, to competing for trophies every single year, and the fans are getting restless.
They want to see a return to the glory days.
So Amorim is walking this tightrope. He needs to balance the demands of the present with his vision for the future. He needs to find the right players, instill the right mentality, and navigate these financial constraints. And he has to do it all under the microscope, with the media scrutinizing his every move and millions of fans around the world watching his every decision.
It's a daunting task, to say the least.
It is.
But it's one that he seems to be embracing with, a mix of determination and cautious optimism. Remember, he did say that football can change in certain moments.
Maybe he believes he can be the one to make that change, the architect of a new era for Manchester United.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're not just analyzing a football match. We're witnessing a club at a crossroads, a manager trying to make his mark on history.
And the outcome is uncertain. Will his gamble pay off? Will he be able to solve this intricate puzzle and restore Manchester United to their former glory?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure. This is a story that's going to continue to unfold in the weeks and months to come.
And we'll be here to break it all down for you every step of the way. But before we get to the final chapter of this deep dive, where we'll explore the potential solutions and the long-term outlook for Man U, let's take a second to reflect on what we've uncovered so far. So we've talked about all the challenges Amorim's facing, but what are the potential solutions? Where does Man U go from here?
One thing that keeps popping up in these sources is, the theme of youth and potential.
Yeah.
It seems like Amorim's really putting a lot of faith in some of the younger players, like Diogo Dalot, who's actually thriving in this experimental environment.
Yeah, Dalot even said in one of these interviews that he feels like Amorim's giving him the freedom and the responsibility to, really spread his wings.
Exactly. It's like he's finally being allowed to reach his full potential.
Right. And if Amorim can create that kind of, core group of young players who are totally on board with his vision, that could be the foundation for something really special.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like planting a garden. You got to nurture those young seedlings if you want them to grow into strong plants.
But what about the players who don't fit into that vision, The ones who are more like weeds than flowers?
Well, that's the tough part of any rebuild, right? There are always going to be casualties players who just aren't part of the long-term plan.
Yeah, like Xerxes. It doesn't sound like he's really in Amorim's good books.
Yeah, and there are probably others who are going to find themselves in a similar situation. It's just the nature of the game, especially at a club like Man U, where the competition for spots is so intense. But, every departure creates an opportunity for someone new to come in, someone who's a better fit for what Amorim's trying to do.
And that's why this January transfer window is so crucial. We know he's looking for a specific type of striker, but the question is, will he be able to find him?
Right. Some of the experts seem to think that Amorim's system, with all the, fluid movement and quick transitions, it requires a very specific kind of player.
Someone who can do it all, basically. Score goals, link up the play, create chances for his teammates.
Right. Not just a goal scorer, but a complete forward. Someone who can be the focal point of the attack without disrupting the flow of the team.
But finding that player is like trying to find a needle in a haystack?
Yeah, especially when you consider FFP. Those financial fair play regulations are always lurking in the background.
It's like trying to go shopping with a limited budget. You might have a huge list of things you want, but you can only buy what you can afford.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Amorim's going to have to be really smart about it.
He needs to find those diamonds in the rough. The undervalued players who can make a big impact without costing a fortune.
It's a challenge that would test any manager. But you know what? Amorim seems to be embracing it. He said that he sees this season as a learning process, a chance to experiment and build something new from the ground up.
So maybe, just maybe, this loss to Crystal Palace was a wake-up call. It showed them that there's still work to do, that they're not where they need to be yet.
It's all part of the journey.
And that's what makes this whole situation so captivating. We're not just watching a football team play, we're witnessing a club in transition, a manager who's trying to create something special.
And it's not going to happen overnight.
Right. So as you continue to follow Man U this season, try to look beyond the headlines, the wins and the losses. Pay attention to those subtle tactical changes, the partnerships that are developing on the pitch, the players who are stepping up and the ones who are fading away.
Yeah, those are the details that will help you understand the bigger picture.
It's a story of ambition, of struggle, of a club that's trying to find its way back to the top.
And we don't know how it's going to end.
That's the beauty of it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of football. We'll be back next week with another fascinating story from the beautiful game.